This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario.
Hello everyone and welcome to Canada Reads American Style. This is Tara and I'm here with Rebecca, and today we are here to discuss, this is going to sound kind of weird without context, and then I'm going to give you context afterwards, our top favorite other Canadian authors. Now, I'm just going to explain that. Give me a second. So there was months ago, the New York Times put out a list of the top 100 books, I believe, right? 100 books. And then our friend Jolene, Bookworm Adventure Girl on YouTube, did a top, I think it ended up being 62 Canadian books of the 2000s. And I believe that's what it was for the New York Times too, of the 2000s. And she had asked us to give our top 10 books, Canadian books that we had liked. And both Rebecca and I realized that we gave our top 10 books from 2000, but there were Canadian authors that weren't included on that list, either due to maybe they didn't have like our top favorite book, or their books that we loved were published prior to 2000. So anyways, we thought it would be fun to discuss some of our favorite other Canadian authors that we think got left off of our list. Right, Rebecca?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I think when we talk about top Canadian authors, there's just a boatload of people whose names pop up to the list immediately, right?
Yeah.
You can't get around, you wouldn't want to get around mentioning them.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be fun, like you said, for us to just talk about some of those authors that maybe won't necessarily be on the top 10 list, but that we really love and highly recommend and enjoy reading.
Yeah. And I'm sure, looking at the list that I've prepared for today, I know that as soon as we finish recording, I'll be like, I left so-and-so off and stuff. But, that's the way it is. That's how our brains work. Sometimes things get missed.
Yep.
Anyways, want to start off with, what are you currently reading?
Yeah, what I'm currently reading, and can I just say I'm gonna give a spoiler here for my goal, but I have to tell you, I've got one book left to read this year for my goal of always reading all my TBR that I purchased the year before. So everything I bought in 2023, I'm on my last book for this year to finish, and that is, let's see, what is the title? Recollections of My Nonexistence by Rebecca Solnit. And I had not heard of her before, but of course she's written like a boatload of books and she's very well known, and I just didn't know her. And it's a collection of essays, and this is really about her life as a young artist growing up in not growing up, but living in San Francisco. She's about 2 years younger than I am, and that's what drew me to the book. Was we're about the same age. I lived in the East Bay. She lived in San Francisco. So I'm familiar, not at the time period necessarily when she was living there in the early years, but and just her feminism and stuff. So I'm enjoying it, but I'll have more to say about it later. So I'm reading that. And I'm also reading The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I'm buddy reading that with our friend Jen. And I was thinking I had never read Steinbeck, but I read Of Mice and Men, which, in high school, everybody reads that. So this is my only other foray into Steinbeck, but I am getting kind of like interested in more classics. So I am doing those two right now. How about you?
I am reading, my current nonfiction, which I am thoroughly enjoying. I just want to make sure it's a long title, so I want to make sure I get it correct here, is I Don't Do Disability and Other Lies I've Told Myself by Adelle Purdham. Right? So this is a fairly new collection. I'm not sure. It may not even be out yet, or it's very recently published. I can't remember the date. It's a collection of essays, and it is fantastic.
Excellent.
It's so good. It's so good. I want to speed read through it because I enjoy it so much, but at the same time, I feel like for a collection of essays, you need to slow down. So I'm being pulled both ways.
Mhm.
I will tell people who aren't familiar with it. So Adelle Purdham is a local Ontario author who has three children, three daughters, one of whom the middle child has Down syndrome. And the collection of essays is it's not simply about her child being the mother of a child with Down syndrome. It is that, but it's also about being a wife, uh, her reflections on disabilities prior to having a child with a disability, her life as a writer. It's so good. Like she's so genuine, and some of the things she shares, it just, uh, yeah, I am really enjoying it because I was drawn to this collection. I think Halle introduced us to this yet again of River Street
Mhm.
Rights. Because when I grew up in the 70s, it was that point when disabilities were kept away. Like I remember being in elementary school and there was a class of children that had disabilities, either physical or like Down syndrome, and they were kept in their own classroom, had their
Mhm.
own separate recess time. And I now can look back on that as an adult and I realized that it created this feeling of other
Mhm.
and made me uncomfortable with people with disabilities, which is because it becomes something that you don't see, that's not there. It's if it's hidden, it's got to be bad, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And so as an adult, it's really made me like face up to that, see it, and that's what brought me to this collection. But it's so much more than that. Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds really good.
it's fantastic.
So that's your nonfiction. Are you reading a fiction currently too?
I started my Christmas reading as far as my
Woohoo!
fiction goes. So I am reading like a murder mystery, but it's also one of those puzzle books. So it's got like now it's got like, is it anagrams? When you're can find like I'm not good at those, so I'm just going with the true on mystery.
Yeah.
So it says at the beginning, so it's the book is The Christmas Jigsaw Murders by Alexandra Benedict. And she says at the beginning, like, first, I'm a huge Charles Dickens fan. So in these following chapters, you will see, this Charles Dickens book referred to, like, go find the anagram or find the reference to the character and all this stuff. And then like puzzle two is that that you can find this kind of stuff. And then like puzzle three was at the beginning of each chapter, there's a letter. And
Oh my
at the end,
gosh.
when you put the letters together, it gives you the name of a famous Christmas song, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. So I'm keeping track of the letters at the chapters, but I'm like, I'm terrible at anagrams, like finding where the title of the Charles Dickens book is all messed up or something. I'm like, I'm not good with that. So I'm like, I'm just going to, and I've read a book before. I think actually the same author. Last Christmas, I read one of her books from a few years ago. And that kind of, I think, trying to figure out the puzzle kind of, it didn't ruin the book for me, but it took away from the book because I couldn't just like deep dive into the mystery itself. So this
Yeah.
time I'm like, okay, for people who love puzzles, these kinds of books exist, but I'm just going to go in for the like straight on mystery, which I'm enjoying because the protagonist is like this 90, well, I think, no, she's like 83-year-old crusty woman who loves jigsaw puzzles and nothing else. Like just, and she makes crosswords. That's her living her career is making crossword puzzles. And she's thrown into a murder mystery. And I kind of love her. She's very crusty. She's a lesbian and she's awesome.
Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh.
that's my fiction. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, that's really good. I have never read a book like that has like a puzzle piece to it, and I kind of feel like you do. You know how I go down a rabbit hole, so I think it'd be dangerous for me to. I would totally lose the story, I think,
Yes.
if I
Or
started
else you
doing
would
that.
love it. I don't know. I could also see you maybe enjoying finding I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know.
I might check it out.
Anyway, should we move into our topic of the day?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so yes, we're looking at our other top favorite Canadian authors that weren't highlighted in our best books of the 2000s. I have six authors, and you have three. Shall I start off?
Yep.
Okay, just so we
Sounds
can
good.
like kind of balance it well. So I'm going to start off. This one is not going to be a surprise. And I'm going to start with perhaps my first Canadian author that I've loved since I was like a young girl, and that would be Lucy Maud Montgomery.
There you go.
Because I'm an Anna Green Gables fan. This is no surprise. Rebecca's shaking her head. Everyone else, if you listen regularly, are also probably shaking your head because I love Anna Green Gables. However, I've also continued to I read I've read like Montgomery's journals, and if I find like a an academic book about Montgomery, oops, sorry, I will pick that up. And I'm continuing to read her short stories and her other books and stuff. So at the moment, what I love is reading Montgomery's books as an adult. Like revisiting my Anne, of course, is delightful, but I see like different aspects now as like a mother and a wife than I did as a 13-year-old girl. But I'm currently reading a collection of her short stories called The Doctor's Sweetheart. And what I love now is looking at Montgomery's writing as like a snapshot of Canadian history and culture and society, and going like, because there are times I'm like, oh, I really love to go back to Anne and just have like a quieter read and stuff. Then there are also aspects of her writing when I'm like, oh, thank God I almost used an expletive. Thank God we're flipping past that time, because what I'm seeing is a trend of like, obviously, she writes a lot about uh, men and women, the relationships, the marriage, because that was essentially a woman's life was to get married. I see a trend of like really old men courting really young women slash girls that makes me uncomfortable to read now as a romance. Like it's the short story might be as a romance, this couple getting together. She's 15. He's like in his 30s, maybe a little older because he'll have gray hair and he's like a doctor and stuff. And I'm like, this is uncomfortable. And then I
Yeah.
realized looking back at some other stories and books I've read is the same. It's not Montgomery, it's the time. And she's like, but I'm like, this is a little snapshot. And I'm like, thank God we're mostly moving past this, but it's weird to read that, but I'm loving it at the same time.
Yeah, and I think literature, especially classic literature, that's everywhere, and especially after you read the Lolita book,
Hmm.
right? So I think there's just this idea that somehow that was a healthy thing, I guess, men and young girls, but thank God, I hope that we have put that to the test, really.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well,
That's fascinating, though.
it is. It really is. And I'm like, how did I not notice this when I was like 15 or 20, or notice it and be okay with it? Like, like I was just like, yeah,
Because
yeah,
it was normalized.
yeah.
Yeah. And maybe somehow somebody who's way smarter than I am will come along and say, "Oh, it was because of an economic thing and da 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 da." But I don't think that explains all of it.
No.
I think
I
men
don't
were
think so.
creepy back then, I'm sorry.
Yeah. If a
So,
35-year-old man is looking at a 15-year-old as a potential wife, sorry.
I
No.
agree. I don't care that I'm looking through it through the eyes of a 2024 time period. Doesn't
No.
matter.
No.
It's creepy no matter what.
It's
So
creepy. Yeah. Okay. What do you have for us? What's your first?
so my first one is he's only well, he's written more than just the 2 books I've read, but he has a new one coming out. So as everyone knows, I just love my nonfiction. And so Marcello de Cintio, who is a plains writer, I think he lived, I don't know, somewhere like Saskatchewan or yeah, I think it's Saskatchewan. He lives there in that area. And the books I've read that he has written, one, and of course now I can't find the darn title of it. Hold on a second here. Pay No Heed to the Rockets, Palestine in the Present Tense, which was published in 2018. And then in 2021, he wrote Driven, The Secret Lives of Taxi Drivers, which I loved. I absolutely love that book. I did interview him both times for both of those books. back in 21. So you can go back and look for those. But he has a new one I noticed, which I'm very excited because I knew he had been writing it. It's coming, it says it's being published May 20th, 2025. And the title is Precarious, The Lives of Migrant Workers. And I really cannot wait to read that. And I am going to reach out to him again to see if he will chat with us about it because he is a journalist. His nonfiction is just absolutely fascinating. He talks to the most interesting people. He puts his stories together in such a compelling way. And if you haven't read him, please read him because I think he's kind of this hidden gem who mostly publishes, I think, in journals and everything, which I don't have access to, I think, really here in the US. But I think as Canadians, you all should be able to find his work and maybe not have paywalls or whatever. I'm not sure. But I would highly recommend Marcello di Cintio. Love, love, love his writing.
Yeah. Good one. I did not think of that. See? Good one. Okay, I'm going to go next with Anne Marie MacDonald because I've been following her writing since her first book in, oh my gosh, was it the 90s? And now I can't remember. I've reread them from the East Coast, from Nova Scotia. I'm going to draw a parallel with Montgomery only in that she also writes historical fiction, even though Montgomery's weren't historical fiction. To me, they've now become kind of historical fiction because that snapshot thing. So obviously, MacDonald, historical fiction, but with like a queer lens on them, which I love. Her most recent book was Fane, which was that huge honker of a book, Fayne,
Hmm.
set in Scotland about a young girl being raised by her father alone on the Scottish Barrens, and family secrets come out that change her life drastically. It's such a great book. I'm treading softly because it's only maybe been about a year, 2 years, but I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. But I love her writing. I also love the East Coast, reading about the East Coast, and I just whatever she's written, I will read. So she had to be on my list.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that I remember because as you said, Fane was like a big honker of a book,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. As was the what was her first? I'm going to give me a quick second. I'm so sorry, and I reread it recently too because
Oh,
I well, like recently being in the last couple of years.
yeah.
That was Fall on Your Knees, which so that was in 96. That was published in 96. That recently was made into a play, I believe, a stage play.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
which I have not had the opportunity to see, but again, that one was set in Cape Breton, and that's an epic family story. It's so good. So good.
Yeah. Okay, that was another as always. And I should say too, I have 3 authors because obviously my reading of Canadian authors is a short my time span here is kind of short, right? It's only been about 5 years where I've really focused on Canadian
Mhm.
authors. And so my list is going to be shorter, but I know you read. I mean, every time you come to the podcast, you have great authors that you're reading, great books that you talk about. So I knew your list was, I'm not surprised, double mine. So not a surprise at all. Okay. My second author, this is one that you recommended to me, this author,
Mm.
and I am obsessed with her and I wish she would get another book out. And I just want to say, shame on you, Canada. You guys need to have a better publishing system for people who are great writers who cannot seem to, I mean, they just have to work so hard to get their public books published. And actually I don't really know. The US might be as hard or harder. I have no idea. I'm just saying, come on, Canada, get it together. I need another book by Sheena Kamal, who wrote I love this woman so much because I love a flawed character, and she wrote one of my no one, I mean, it's gonna be in my top 10 my entire life. One of the best flawed characters in Nora Watts, and she wrote this series, the Nora Watts series, and I will list them in the show notes just so you have them. But I have read 4 of her books. So they were all Nora Watts books because there was one that was like a 1.5. They're like listed 1 through 4, but then it's like
Mhm.
1.5 because it was just a little short story that I was actually able to pay for and get a copy of on my e-reader. But she also, which you read and I haven't read yet, is Fight Like a Girl. And I think that's a YA book, and I do want to read that. It's on my list. But what I love about her writing is it feels very visceral. Like you feel like you're in Vancouver and that you can just feel the city in a way that maybe other writers don't bring the
Yeah.
city is definitely a character in her novels. And in fact, it was so funny. My sister and her boyfriend went up to Vancouver, and I had read all this stuff in the Nora Watts series. So I said to my sister, "Oh my God, you have to go to the seawall and tell me what it's like," because I had it in my head, like what it looked like and just the moodiness of it. So my sister sent back pictures, and I went, "What? That is what it looks like." Because in my head, it was like dark and scary and,
Yeah.
Nora would have practically been killed there, and anyway, it was just hilarious to me that Sheena Kamal had built up this thing in my head that is amazing, and I'm sure at night it does have a different feel than the pictures my sister took in the daytime, but anyway, I just love Sheena Kamal for her ability to write compelling, flawed characters, really descriptive in place. I love that more than anything. So if you haven't read Nora Watts, and there's no more books are coming in this series, it breaks my heart. And this is why I say shame on you because there should have been more books in the Nora Watts series. I wasn't finished with her, and yet we have to be. And
Yeah.
so, but I guarantee you will love this series. Highly, highly recommend her as an author.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take a twist and I'm going to introduce actually the only male author on my list, and that is Guy Gavriel Kay, who does historical fantasy, which I know we don't bring that a lot to the podcast. I don't think it's something you're interested in, or not really, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not generally either, except for this man's work. I love his work. He's been writing since the probably the 80s, I believe. I started off with his like classic trilogy, which I can't remember. Oh, the Fiano. Oh, I can't pronounce it either. Dang it. The Fianovar Tapestry, which was published in 84. So yes, historical fantasy. I don't even know if he likes that term. I think I read an article somewhere where he didn't love that term, but I'm going to use it anyways
Mhm.
because he sets his books in a historical period. So you're deep diving into that historical period, but there are elements of fantasy, right? That just, oh my God, I love. And now I'm just like kind of drooling over it. I love his book so much. My favorite is The Lions of Al-Rassan, which is set in, oh, it's not, oh, Moorish Spain. I've read
Ooh.
this book at least twice, maybe 3 times, and I sobbed like a freaking baby at the end of it every single time. Yeah. So if you're interested in historical fantasy and want to know where to like dip in, check out Guy Gavriel Kay. They are chunkers of books. They're not like, you're not going to be fast reads, they're not quick reads. But yeah, dip a little toe in, and start with the Lions of Alrazan. I'm going to put that out there as well.
So is it how do I say this? Because I'm not really big on fantasy, but
Mhm.
does he do like a lot of like world building as they say?
Yes, like you're like world building in that you know what historical period you are in. Do you know what I mean? But like, and it's not going to be like the fantasy elements aren't huge,
Mhm.
but there's going to be gods. Like there might be
Mhm.
like if you're in I think one of them ones I also really like, he does a like in the Viking times. So you're going
Mhm.
to come across like some Viking gods in there. Or more Spain, there's going to be like some a little magic and stuff.
Okay. So I'm wondering if our friend Sarah, who's kind of really into fantasy if she's read him. So I don't know that we've ever asked her that. So
No, I don't either. I should
yeah,
send
we'll
her a
have to
little
follow.
message. I'm curious.
Yeah, we'll have to follow up with her because I'd just be curious because she reads, I think, kind of widely across fantasy genre.
Yeah,
I think.
if she doesn't, she may really enjoy him.
Hmm.
Good thinking. I'm gonna reach out to her.
Yeah. Okay. So my last one, I I'm kind of brokenhearted because as far as I can tell, I don't know if he's done writing or what, but Wayne Arthurson, who I is one of my favorite Canadian authors. I've read 5 of his books, which is a lot for me for one author. That shows how much I really, really like him. But so anyway, Wayne Arthurson, again, he's from the plains, the prairies, whatever, and he was a journalist for a small newspaper. I think that was his early career, and we've interviewed him a few times. And he is now, I think, representing authors. I think he's doing. I don't know what you call that, what that job title is called, but anyway, publicist. I guess officially,
Yeah.
I don't really know if that's the proper term, but he represents other authors now, and I love that for him. Yay! But I'm upset that that there are no books coming out from him because anyway. So the ones I love, the Red Chesterfield. It's 99 pages of just wild mystery. It's crazy. I've read it twice, I think. I think it's twice. I don't think I've read it a third time. I it's if you're in a reading slump, whenever people say they're in a reading slump, I always go read the Red Chesterfield because
Yeah.
it'll take you out of a slump because it's just such a fun book and
Well, I
it's
think it's also an iconic, like, it's if you wanna know how to write a mystery, I think you read The Red Chesterfield,
mhm,
because it's a classic, even though it's not a classic in the terms that it's not well known and stuff like this, it should be, because it's
absolutely.
yeah, perfectly written.
Yeah, there's not a word out of place. Again, 99 pages, but it's a roller coaster ride. It's fun. I think you can read so much into it that he may or may not have meant, but
Mhm.
that's what's really fun about it is you can really do a deep dive because he leaves things ambiguous and it just allows you to use your own imagination, and that's why I say I think it's a great, book to get you back into reading because you can have so much fun with it. I loved it, but and then I did read he has a series, The Traitors of Camp 133 is the title, and I think it's part of a series, I don't even know what the series is called. Now that one, I read it because I owned it, but I wasn't as crazy about that one. It was basically about a prison camp in the plains during World War II and these prisoners that lived in the camp and everything. And I'm just not a wartime kind of fiction reader, really. I'm sure that it's very popular. It's been published in a million languages, so I think people really enjoy that. So I will just put it out there that for me, it was just like, okay, it's fine. But in general, it wasn't my kind of book. But it's the Leo DeRoche series, and there were 3 books published, and they were different seasons. There was he did publish fall, winter, and summer, but we didn't get a spring. And it was one of those situations where when I interviewed him, he talked about the fact that his, I think his publisher, something happened to the publisher or the editor or something, and then trying to go to another publisher to print to publish a 4th book in a series is just almost impossible. And so the book, he said it will never come out. I was kinda hoping he'd offer it up to me so I could read it, but whatever. It didn't happen, but that's okay. Not really, but anyway, I wanted to anyway, Leo DeRoche, again, flawed character. I promise you, if you read book 1, which is Fall from Grace, I'm telling you, he's an indigenous newspaper guy who is flawed and flawed in a way I've never read a character that was this kind of flawed. Like, it took me by surprise. You're reading along, and then all of a sudden you go, "Wait, what?" And I don't give any have you ever read any of those?
I did quite a
Yeah,
while ago, though. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, I love this character, and I think at one point I even said, like, when I don't know if I did this officially for the podcast, but it's sort of like, if there's a fictional character you could meet, who would you wanna meet? I totally would wanna meet Leo DeRoche. I just wanna meet him because he's such a messed up, screwed up human that I just think he would have so many stories, and he would be a fascinating character to
Mhm.
meet in person. So, anyway, Wayne Arthurson, I love your work. I'm bummed that we aren't seeing anything, but I'm hoping that your careers as a representative to other authors is flourishing and that you're happy. But damn it,
Yeah.
I want a book by Arthurson. So that's my last one. But and I've read 5 of his books. So
Okay. Where am I going to start next? Okay. I'm going to go with Leslie Crew, who I've seen now that I've started talking and I'm going through my list. I have a trend of East Coast authors. That's unintentional, but that's what's happened here. So Leslie Crew, I was only introduced to her a couple of years ago through Canada Reads because her book, The Spoon Stealer, made it onto the long list for Canada Reads. Did not make it to the short list that year. I feel like it was in 2021, 2022. I
yeah.
can't remember. I read it because I'm like, that sounds like a book I would like, and I loved it. I loved the protagonist. I loved the story, and that has led me. Then I think I've read one other book of Leslie's, Nosy Parker. Again,
Mhm.
loved it, and have two more of her books on my shelf to read because I'm making my way through her backlist and any new books. I've since given one of her books to a friend. Last year, I gave it to her for her birthday, I think, and she just read it last week, and she was like, "Why did I wait so long? This book is amazing." And I'm like, "I know it is.
Yeah.
I told you it was." So I love Leslie Crew. They're like fantastic characters, and they're like warm and cozy
Mhm.
and humorous, and then she's also going to kick you in the heart, which is really, that is my favorite combo for books and movies, TV shows. I like to laugh, and then I like to cry as well.
I know. I loved The Spoon Stealer, and in fact, that character, I don't remember her name, but that main character is still like, when I think about her, that the author, the character, she's just such a memorable character. I just will never forget her. I
Yeah,
loved her.
Emmeline, something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Something like that. So she's on my list. I guess I'll just keep going then. And
yeah.
let's see. I'm kind of trying to do it chronologically as when I started reading, but that's not true because this author, my next author, also from Halifax, although originally from Ontario, but still the east of Canada, I read prior to Leslie Crew, and that is Stephanie Domet, who
Oh,
is a
yeah.
Halifax author, or Nova Scotia. She is also the founder of the Afterwards Literary Festival, which I think just happened last week in Halifax. I have a personal connection with Stephanie in that I know her sister through when I used to do like the craft show circuit. And her sister had posted about her book, Fallsy Downsy. So I read it just out of curiosity and because, you know, a friend had mentioned it. So I'm like, I will pick up her friend. And it became one of my all time favorite books. Like, I love her. And then when I got to meet her in person one year at a craft show, I fangirled on her. I love this book. I love this book. And then she's written another book off the top of my head. I can't think of it right now. Again, I loved that book. She's fantastic. Like two of your authors, she's not a prolific writer because she has so much other. She was also a journalist or and a host on CBC Radio in Nova Scotia. I think this literary festival that she's founded and runs takes up a lot of her time. She's also very involved in the literary community in Nova Scotia, I believe, as well. So I don't know how much writing time she has, but whenever she writes a book, I'm going to be reading it.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. Love her writing. Now let's go to a more recent one that only in the past couple of years has gotten on my radar, but I've read everything that she's written so far, and this is due to you, and this is Halle, our friend of the podcast,
Mhm.
Halle Gaudry, who writes poetry, short fiction, memoir, and I think she's coming out with a fiction book next year, in the next couple of years,
Mhm.
and children's fiction. If I'm wrong, I
Mhm.
think she's got a children's book coming out in the next year or two as well. Holly is a pistol. Like I just I love her energy on Instagram. I love her devotion to Canadian authors and Canadian books. She never steers us wrong when it comes to like a book recommendation. And she so I love her for that, but I also love her writing. So I've read her memoir, her poetry, her short fiction. I love them all. She's fantastic and whatever she writes, I will read.
Okay, I have to add her too because you know what I did was I was going through my list of, books I've read and I didn't make it into the more recent this was all my older stuff that I really they jumped out at me, but you're right. I've read all of her stuff as well
Mhm.
and I feel the same way. Whatever she publishes, I'm going to read because I think I don't know how she does it that whatever genre she's in, whatever style, I mean, she just I think it's her mind, right? She's very candid about I don't know if it's ADHD or something, but that she just is in a lot of different directions. But the fact that she can get that down on paper in different ways, different, fiction, nonfiction, short fiction, memoir, children's book. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised, but you're right. She is, damn it. I didn't, that's a great one.
I'm I'm actually surprised that she wasn't on your list.
I know. I think I just got to 3 and went, "Okay, I'll stop at 3." You know what I'm saying? That is so funny.
Yeah.
I'd
Okay.
like I'd like to retroactively, I would like to add her as my 4th.
Good. She's on there so that
Yes.
she gets like double
Yes.
double exposure from both of us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And my last one, I don't know if that's six or seven. I think one, two, three, four, five. I think I just added. Sorry, I think I added a seventh one because as we were talking, I'm like, how do I not have this woman on my list when I am currently? She's one of my current reading goals, Helen Humphreys, and I'm like, how did I not put her on the list right away? So I'm going to put out there Helen Humphreys, Ontario writer, who also does fiction, nonfiction, poetry. She does it all, and I think she teaches English lit at a university in Kingston. She's amazing. Just recently on the weekend, I was at my local bookstore, a different drummer, for another event, which I will talk about on a future episode.
Okay.
But after the event, I was doing like browsing because I'm at the bookstore and I'm going to browse. And I had focused. I'm like, I need a Helen Humphreys book because I don't have a current one to read next when I'm ready to read one. So I was just like squeezing through people who were in line for a signature, and I'm like, I'm just going to squeeze on by, and people are like, What are you? I'm like, I'm not budding. I'm like, I just need to get to that book, and they're like, what book? And I'm like, Helen Humphreys, have you not read her? Because I'm like, you need to read her. She's amazing. And so I picked up a new book. Well, a new book to me. It's one of her much older books, a historical fiction. And I'm sticking her on the list. She's fantastic. And then I had a conversation about the books with the bookseller about her because she was like, I love Helen Humphreys. I'm like, I know.
So maybe they'll even stock more of her stuff. You never know.
They do a good job of,
Mhm.
like, if I went into an Indigo, I don't know if I'm going to find a Helen Humphreys book, especially her backlist.
Mhm.
But if she has a new book, it's going to for sure be at different drummer, and they always have two or three of her backlist. So I can usually count on finding one there. Otherwise, they will definitely order it in for me too. They're
Cool.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But there we go. There's my list.
See, I knew you'd have a great list. That's
Thank
awesome.
you, and
So,
ditto,
cool.
ditto.
Well, I just think all of my authors Marcello's got one coming out next year, but I think the other 2 need to, like we need to get them published soon, but
Yeah, I
fingers
feel like
crossed.
Sheena Kamal. I feel like she's going to have something
I do too.
coming down the line. You know,
I agree.
I don't know
Yeah,
why
because
I think that. But
I follow her and she hasn't said anything officially, but I just sort of feel like I just had the same vibe. Like feel like something's coming.
yeah.
So please, please, please.
And let's put it out there for Wayne Arthurson. I think maybe he just needed a little break. But if you're a writer, can you really stop writing? I
That's
don't
what
know.
I think. That's what I
I don't
think.
know. I'm not a writer myself, so maybe I'm like just projecting on to writers, and there are writers listening right now who are like, ease off, lady. Like, we don't need the added pressure. But
I know, because I have to tell you, the other author I just wanna mention, that wrote Heather Stemp, wrote my Amelia
yes.
series that I love so much, and I did kinda laughingly, but seriously, say to her, "I need a 4th book in Amelia because the 3rd one ends a certain way, and I need one more to complete it," and, I don't know, like, I'm hoping that put a little bug in her ear because I did interview
Fingers
her, but
crossed.
you never know, but it's like, I also love her writing, and I need her to write something else too. So anyway,
Yeah.
okay. But I agree with you because since I'm not an author, do authors hear people, like their fans bugging them to write again soon? And are they feeling that pressure, and is that a bad thing? So that's why I always ask authors at the end, like, is there anything you're currently working
Mhm.
on? I always feel like, hey, we just want to know if we can anticipate something. But I wonder if that's the most dreaded question they hear sometimes because it feels
Yeah.
pressure, like we're pressuring them or something. So I don't know. But we love you authors, so please,
Yeah.
we just wanna read more of your work,
Yeah.
that's all.
We'll keep reading. You keep
Yes.
writing. That's all we're asking.
Exactly.
Give and take.
It's a codependent relationship, we need them to
Yeah.
keep writing.
Yeah. We do. Anyways, this was so much fun. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and happy reading. Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style, and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.